Hi, I'm Dave,
And I'm Kevin.
and we're from TRINUS Technologies. Kevin, how do you like my new shirt?
Good. It's very appropriate because I think today we're talking about the end of life for Windows 7 and Server 2008 R2.
Yes, we are, and we want to focus in on how's this going to impact businesses.
Yes, well, and the potential for business impact is extremely large, and so it's a very important topic to talk about. So for those of you who don't know, Windows 7 and Server 2008 R2 from Microsoft are going end of support January 14th, 2020.
Okay, how does a business prepare? How do they start to do this?
Well, that's a great question, Dave. I think before I answer that, I think it's important to understand what the impact to them might be if they don't upgrade. And the biggest thing there is Microsoft Windows updates. While they may be annoying for a lot of people, the biggest thing that they do is they keep your computer or your server secure. And it's important for a business or a manager or owner to realize that a single machine, be it a server or a workstation that's not upgraded before then, can represent a potential security hole in their network because various security threats, be it malware, viruses, or intrusion or hack abilities or threats on a computer, may not be patched by Microsoft after January 14th, 2020.
Well, that's interesting because most businesses, if they've got some professional IT services managing their systems, have really good firewalls and antivirus. Isn't that enough protection?
It is, but those types of antivirus and firewalls only don't directly overlap on the types of things that Windows updates tend to fix. Lots of security updates that are fixed in Windows are what are called zero-day vulnerabilities, and so those are vulnerabilities that are typically designed, or the nature of the vulnerability means that they can bypass antivirus or traditional firewalls. And lead to direct compromise in that aspect. And so antivirus and firewalls are typically scanning for a different type of threat or can be bypassed by these vulnerabilities that require operating system level patches to correct.
Okay. Well, I think most managers understand Windows 7 on a desktop computer, and so getting an inventory of those sounds fairly straightforward. But I'm almost guarantee you that most managers don't have a clue of what's in that server room and what kind of operating systems and applications they have on there. What do they do?
So that's a great question. I would actually say that getting a inventory of what computers on the network, let alone just servers, is actually a little bit more difficult than it sounds. The majority of organizations that we work with, or when we start working with them, we find that they don't have a accurate inventory of even their computers, let alone their servers and other pieces of networking equipment. So the first step, to answer your previous question, Dave, the first step that any business needs to go through is a accurate inventory of an asset management practice to figure out exactly what servers and computers they have on their network, and to figure out how compliant they are. Are they still using Windows 7? Are they using Windows 10? Are there maybe some Windows 8 or 8.1 machines kicking around in there that need to be looked at as well? So once an IT company or an organization or an internal IT department understands what they have to work with, then it's easier to come up with a game plan in terms of upgrading.
Okay, so let's zero in on this server room that's got all these servers humming away in it. So I heard Server 2008 and R2.
Yep.
Are there other applications that are impacted?
Yes, there are. So two other server applications that are going end of life on January 14th, 2020 are Microsoft Exchange 2010, which for those of you who aren't familiar is an email platform. And then there's also Microsoft SQL Server 2008, which will no longer be receiving patches or support as well. So both of those applications also need to be replaced and upgraded before January 14th.
Okay, so if I'm thinking correctly, Microsoft has had several server versions since 2008.
They have.
So that would tell me that any server that is actually running 2008 is probably quite old.
Yes. So the majority, there's one of two reasons why somebody would still be using a 2008 R2 server. One of those could be is exactly what you touched on, in the sense that that's what the server was deployed with when it was new, and so the server was quite old. and is likely at the end of its usable lifespan anyways. The other potential is that the server was set up with 2008, maybe newer, but was set up with 2008 R2 anyways, because there is a piece of legacy software or a legacy application that will not run in a more modern server environment. You're right. Microsoft has released a multitude of server environments, Server 2012, 2012 R2, 2016, and 2019 since 2008 R2, but you'd be surprised how many people still have it.
Wow. So if you've got 2008, you're really got some antique software there.
Yes, likely.
Now, you touched on a point, and that is legacy application software that might not be compatible with some of these newer server operating systems. What's a business owner to do about those?
So the first thing to do is talk to the vendor or the support of the particular software itself. That's really critical. Sometimes your IT vendor or your IT staff may know if it's compatible or not, or know what to do to make it compatible. But in a lot of cases, if you're still running legacy software like that, the operating or the software vendor needs to provide an update to the software or provide a new version of the software that is compatible with a more modern server operating system. Now, the same thing goes for Windows 7 and Windows 10. There are some pieces of software, while the majority of software works in Windows 10, there are still some out there that will not. And so it's important to make sure before doing the upgrade, be it on the server side or on the desktop and laptop side, to make sure that the applications that you're using are compatible.
Wow. Okay, so replacing one or more servers, that sounds expensive. Is this a good time for business owners to consider moving to the cloud?
It could potentially. Moving to the cloud, it can be is very situational. In some cases, it's extremely relevant and can result in a much different way to consume IT infrastructure, much different cost, much more of an operational cost structure as opposed to making a large multi-thousand-dollar investment straight up front. But it's important that you talk to your IT provider or your IT department to make sure that moving to the cloud is a fit for you. There are a couple things to keep in mind. The first is the performance of a cloud solution as opposed to running servers on your own premise. The biggest reason for that is if you've got a slow internet connection or don't have the ability to have a fast internet connection, you will likely notice a reduction in usability and performance, which may or may not be okay depending on your application or depending on your organization. The other big thing to keep in mind is security and regulations. And so there are some Canadian cloud providers, but there are also, the majority of cloud providers are American. And so if you're okay with having data in American data centers or off of your site, even in a Canadian data center, then the cloud might be a fit for you. But if you're in a more sensitive industry, like the health industry or a financial industry or the law industry, or maybe you're a government, then moving to the cloud might not make as much sense. It really needs to be approached on a case-by-case basis.
All right, okay. Now, I know a lot of businesses have multiple locations, and sometimes they use internet connections, VPN connections to connect into their servers and what have you. Are these remote offices and connections going to be at risk when they migrate from Server 2008 to a newer version?
It all depends on how the project is managed and how that's all done. If the IT provider or the IT department is doing their job well, then they shouldn't be. Any connectivity or any of those types of connections are easily doable in a newer operating system. And in a lot of cases, there's actually new features and functionality that can make those remote connections even better or more practical. But if not planned for or not thought of throughout that process, adding in multiple sites, especially that connect remotely, can result in a lot more headaches.
Okay, and that touches on another point. I know a lot of business owners are concerned about downtime.
Yes.
They don't want to lose any productivity. They don't want employees sitting around not having computers to work on.
Mm-hmm.
So how does a business owner go about planning to minimize the downtime?
That's a great question. Really, this needs to be strategized, or any of these upgrade projects need to be strategized around times that the business can afford to be down. There will almost have to be some level of downtime if we're moving from a Server 2008 environment to a newer environment. We may be able to minimize that, or the IT provider could possibly minimize that. But there will have to be some level of downtime. And then actually one of the larger downtimes will likely be the maneuver or the move from Windows 7 to Windows 10, because if you're getting new computers, that can be disruptive, or if you're upgrading existing computers, that actually will take typically a little bit longer than deploying new computers will, because you've got to back up the data, format the machine, and then put the data back onto it. So you actually add an extra step in there. What we suggest doing in a lot of cases is finding a time, maybe after hours or over a weekend, to facilitate these upgrades, because the majority of times there's less users that are using the system, or sometimes there's no users using the system.
Okay, well, some business owners out there might be thinking, wow, I need to replace servers, I need to replace workstations. It sounds like I need a whole new IT system. Should they just do it all at once, or should they stage it in a little bit at a time, or maybe the servers first and the workstations, or vice versa? What's the best practice there?
That's a good question as well. That's really up to the discretion of your IT department or your IT vendor. In some cases, it's easier to do everything at the same time. And in some cases, I would say the majority of cases, it makes more sense to stage things in. And so if we're talking about upgrading servers at the same time that we're updating workstations, typically doing one before the other makes most sense. We prefer to typically do the servers before we upgrade the workstations, but that is very situational dependent. And so you'd want to defer to your IT provider or IT department on the best way to do that.
Okay, all right. Well, I know we've always been saying that backups are the backbone of any good, well thought out IT system. Will upgrading to these new server infrastructure and new workstations going to impact the backups?
It likely can, but this can also be seen as an opportunity to replace potentially old or legacy backup systems, because typically in moving from a backup systems are procured or installed as part of a server installation. And so if you're replacing a legacy server, the backup system will also likely need to be replaced. And this is a good opportunity for people who had traditional on-premise backups with potentially rotating media, being it external hard drives or tapes, or a type of backup like that, to explore potentially cloud backup solutions, or automated offsite backup solutions, or disaster recovery solutions that will be supported with a newer operating system.
Okay, well, finally, I guess it's all a matter of timing.
Mm-hmm.
Should business owners be waiting till January 14th, 2020, and then start considering these upgrades?
No, the sooner that any business owner or organization head can get on top of this, the better. Just because if you're using an outsourced IT provider, they are going to be swamped with other people and other businesses leaving things to the last minute. Even your own internal IT department will be swamped coming up to that time, because there's a lot of Windows 7 computers still out there in the wild. There's a lot of Server 2008 R2 servers that are still out there in the wild, plus these other applications. So it's going to be a very busy time come the end of this year, and especially in January next year. So I would suggest getting on top of this as soon as possible.
Okay, all right. Well, some great advice for today's sessions. Thanks, everyone.